This session, we're going to focus on just some of those thought processes and those tasks you have to do at the very beginning of your planning for the new semester or the new school year. So these are our objectives for this session. Please take a moment to read over those. If we have time, I'm going to add another objective to this, which is that you can describe sort of some do's and don'ts for classroom design, like your physical space. We might not have quite enough time for that, but I've included slides on that here, and you'll get those as well. But we're absolutely going to look at course level learning outcomes and syllabus writing together today. So let's start with course level learning outcomes. And we're going to start with a question for you all in the chat, which is a productive thought process for you to begin writing course level learning outcomes and or revising course level learning outcomes that you might have already written. So my question to you is, what is your ultimate goal as an economic educator? If you had to articulate what it is you're hoping to achieve with your students in a short sentence, what might you say? Go ahead and tell us in the chat. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I know it takes a moment to type that up. Okay. Empowerment, tackling the real world. Yeah, we definitely want them to be into, we're interested in econ. I would love it if I could get them on board with me, for sure. See economics everywhere, evaluate choices. Yeah, use it in their lives. Yeah, I think if you read over this list, I think most of us can identify with a lot of this. We're like, yes, and that, and this too, and this other thing. This is a really helpful thought process for writing course level learning outcomes. So let's talk about what course level learning outcomes are and how they can be beneficial, and then show you some examples of course level learning outcomes that might serve as inspiration for you all. So what are course level learning outcomes? These are short statements that tell students what they will know and be able to do at the end of the course. So they're similar to the learning objectives that you might share with students at the beginning of a lesson, but they're bigger picture than that, right? They're not going to include as many sort of specific concepts. They're going to be broader in nature. So you're thinking about the whole course, the whole semester, the whole year. What are the things you want them to be able to do when they leave your course, and what should they know? The beauty of writing course level learning outcomes is for you as the instructor, right? And so in my experience, for me as an instructor, they're really helpful for me in making all the other decisions I need to make about my course and deciding what my assessments should look like, whether a particular concept fits in my semester or not, because I can look back at my course level learning outcomes and ask myself, does this align with what I've said are my ultimate goals for this course for my students? And if not, then I know that I shouldn't proceed. So it helps me make decisions. It acts as a kind of a backbone for the course that informs my choices. But it can also benefit students if you share those course level learning outcomes with them, which I would strongly encourage you to do. There's research in economic education that suggests that having a small number of course level learning outcomes and sharing them with students and revisiting them occasionally during the course can help them understand what the goal is of the class, can help them be better studiers in that they know, like, if these are the ultimate goals, these are the kinds of things I need to know and be able to do. And it can also support them in their metacognition to help them think about their own thinking. So if we tell them at the beginning of the course, these are our ultimate goals, and then periodically we ask them to think about how confident do you feel about your ability to do these things, then we can, again, support them in their own metacognition, which research suggests is beneficial to them. In the chat, would someone's asking for us to reshare if that's the program or the Zoom link for the other session, the student feedback session. We'll get that in the chat for you. So if you're on board with course level learning outcomes being beneficial for you and for the students, how should we proceed? Well, we need to remember that we're focusing on the big picture, not minutia. So these, again, are going to be broader in scope than the learning objectives we might have for a given lesson. And the research in economic education around this issue suggests that a smaller number is better. Because if we have, let's say, if we have a dozen course level learning outcomes, they all, students, they might lose some of their ability to focus us and focus our students on what's most important. So try to limit yourself to a handful, let's say 3 to 6, and really narrow it down. And to be most useful to us as educators and to our students, our course level learning outcomes should be things that we can clearly assess. We can collect some evidence and know if students have met those course level learning outcomes or not. So we need to have specific observable action verbs in these course level learning outcomes. So we would want to avoid a verb like understand. Students will understand X and Y and Z, because that's hard to measure. We need to be a little more specific. Do we want them to define something? Do we want them to apply it in a novel scenario? So more specificity will be helpful to us so that we can measure them and so that students really understand what we want them to be able to do. So let's look at some sample course level learning outcomes for an economics course and sort of use this advice to improve an initial course level learning outcome. And then I'm going to show you some course level learning outcomes that economists have suggested for introductory courses. So let's start with a course level learning outcome that it's not terrible. It's a thing that we probably all agree we want our students to be able to do, right? As a result of completing this course, you'll be able to understand decision making. Many of you wrote about decision making and choices in the chat a moment ago. The problem is this is hard to measure. How will I know that students can do this? What would a summative assessment look like where I'm going to collect information on this course level learning outcome? So let's see if we can make it make it easier to measure. So we might reword it this way. As a result of completing this course, you'll be able to use economic concepts to analyze decisions. So that's a little clearer to me. Like, I can present students with a decision that an individual or a firm or a society made and ask them, use the concepts from this course and the language of the discipline to analyze, to make sense of, to explain this choice. That's something I can measure and have some confidence about whether students have achieved this course level learning outcome or not. So let's see if we can improve it further. So this is the one we left off with, right? You'll be able to use economic concepts to analyze decisions. I'm going to add a little specificity to this, which will maybe help students better understand what this will look like and help me better craft an assessment that measures this ultimate outcome. So as a result of completing this course, you'll be able to choose and use economic concepts and models to analyze and evaluate choices, outcomes, and policies. So I want them to use economic concepts, but also models, like, for example, a supply and demand model, to make sense of choices, to evaluate the choice, but it can also be outcomes and policies as well. Now, there's no one right set of course level learning outcomes. That's dependent on you and what you're hoping to achieve with students. But in an ideal world, they're easy for us to measure and they're clear for both us, for our decision making, and for students to understand what it is we want them to be able to do. So where can we where can we get some inspiration for writing these, right? Certainly we have our own experience and values around economic education, but we can look to other sources to get some ideas as well. So we could look at standards documents. So you'll get these slides at the end of this session and in our follow-up email later today. The Council for Economic Education, the national organization for K-12 economics, just about a year ago now, published revised standards for economics. We could look to that. The National Council for the Social Studies has a C3 framework, which offers guidance for state social studies standards. So that's a helpful document as well. Wherever you are teaching, the state you're in, or the institution you work for might have some course level learning outcomes that they've drafted. You can look to those. But we can also look to economists. What do experts in this discipline suggest are essential outcomes for students in an introductory economics course? And there are publications that we can look to help us with this. So, for example, All Good and Bear in the Journal of Economic Education have suggested some course level learning outcomes for us. They call them essential competencies in economics. So take a moment to look over this list and see if any of those resonate with you. These were written for our college level course. So I might not use all of these at the high school level, or I might word them differently or tweak the focus somewhat. But it's a place to start. It gives me some ideas that I might like to use. I like this last one about communicating economic ideas, for example. We haven't shared the slide deck yet, but we will at the end of this session. So it's coming, I promise. So here's, again, it's All Good and Bearer. This is specifically for an introductory microeconomics course. So there's some overlap with what I just showed you, but take a moment to scan over these. And notice there's only 5 here. So suggesting a smaller number might be more helpful. And here's a couple. I'm going to share with you a couple that we've included in the syllabus template that you'll get shortly here for an introductory economics course at the high school level. So here are the ones that we've included in that template. If you want to use that syllabus template, you can alter the language to whatever works for you. I am sharing my screen. I hope everyone can see it. Yeah, so you should be seeing some slides. You might need to adjust your view on your Zoom to see the screen that I'm sharing. Okay. We want students to apply economic reasoning to everyday life. And so at Econophil, our high school economics curriculum uses 4 principles of economic thinking that we borrowed from economists Betsy Stevenson and Justin Wolfers. So that's a key learning outcome for our curriculum, is that students can use these principles, they can apply it to everyday life. And our assessments are built around students being able to do that. You've seen this learning outcome a moment ago. So this is one that we've included in our syllabus template. We want them to use economic concepts and models to analyze choices and policies and outcomes. And then finally, recognize and communicate economic ideas in a variety of contexts. So we settled on 3 that we think align well with our curriculum. But again, the right set of learning outcomes depends on your course, what you think is really important, what you know about your students, what you want them to be able to do when they leave your course, whether that's a semester or a year or even more. So I wanted to pause here for a moment and give you an opportunity to uh, draft a course level learning outcome. Maybe you have one already in your syllabus that you want to share in the chat. That would be helpful, especially for those of us who are newer to this. Or you want to take a stab at one now. These don't have to be polished. So let's pause here for a moment. And if you're willing, I'd love you to put it in the chat. So you're just filling in the end of this statement. As a result of completing this economics course, you will be able to. So I've given you some verbs that are helpful because we can create an assessment that measures this, and then ask you to fill in the rest of the statement. So we'll pause here, and if anyone's willing to put a course level learning outcome, a sample in the chat, we'd be most grateful. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, we can measure that, right? We could give them a little scenario and say, how's economics apparent here? What's going on? Oh, great. Describe economic conditions. Nice. Yeah, exactly. These are what I'm seeing here. These are things I can measure. Perfect. hmm Yeah, and some of them might be pretty basic. Like I want you to be able to define these things because these ideas are really important, right? You can define these and you can apply them in some way. Oh, I love this, Jacqueline. Communicate how economics affects your life. I absolutely want students to be able to do that. Communicate the impact of government policies on the economy. Nice. Right? And some of you might teach other social studies courses as well. And there might be some overlap between these and other courses like civics or your personal finance course. Um, to the point in the chat, if you'd like, I can copy these suggestions from the chat and put them in a document in the resource folder after today's event. I'm happy to do that, Eric, if that's helpful. Yeah. Yes, I will do that. So, we don't have enough time right in today's session for you to write all of your course level learning outcomes because there's a few other things we'd like to accomplish, but we are going to share these slides with you. After this session, there is a 20-minute window that you can use to take a break, but also as an opportunity to if you want to join a breakout room focused on course level learning outcomes, you can collaborate with one another on these, or you can just work independently on writing some course level learning outcomes if you'd like to do that for the upcoming academic year. With the time we have left, I want to make sure we talk about a syllabus. Oh, I went too far. I want to talk about the syllabus. Every single academic year, a semester, I made changes to my syllabus, and maybe you're doing the same thing. And I strongly believe it slowly got better, and quite slowly, slower than I'd like to admit. Um, but over the years, I've learned a lot about writing a syllabus that I think really improved the document over time, and have read up on the research about a syllabus, and want to share that with you all. And as we start this, I want to let you know that we've created a syllabus template here at Econophil that we're going to share with you today that incorporates some of this information, but it's also editable, so you can make it work for you if you like what you're seeing here today. So in the Zoom chat, if you will, how do you want students to feel after reading your syllabus? Let's start with that. We have given you the template in the chat, but we're going to look at it in just a little bit later. How do you want students to feel after they read your syllabus? Tell us in the chat, please. Thank you, Patricia. I would love that. Yeah, excited would be ideal. I know it's hard to imagine a syllabus being an exciting document, maybe, but I think it can be. Oh, I love this, like confident, sure feeling like they can succeed. Oh, these are great. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, students read a lot of syllabi at the beginning of the school year, and I don't know that they often feel excited or confident after reading them, but I'm on board with you that that's what I want them to, that's how I want them to feel. So I want you to keep this in mind as we um, look at how we might craft our syllabus, right? There are ways to make this happen. Um, and then also, so I want you to think about that as you're working on your syllabus for the new semester or year. But also, what do you think, what is most important to communicate to students in the first week? Like, what do they need to know in the first week? There's a lot of stuff they need to know, but maybe they don't need to know it all in the first week. So if you had to identify what are some of the things that you want them to know right away about what's going to happen in your course, what are some of the things you want to make sure to tell them immediately? All right, policies, expectations, what else? Okay, good. How to get help. Yeah, cell phone, and especially if you're, in Arizona, just this last academic year was the first year where cell phones they're not supposed to be in the classrooms at all. So that was a big change. Yeah, so together, I mean, these two questions should inform what you're doing with your syllabus. How do you want them to feel? What do they need to know right away? And also thinking about like what can they learn a little bit later? Because maybe that doesn't need to be in the syllabus, because maybe we don't want our syllabus to be 10 pages, because that's overwhelming, right? So with these two questions in mind, let's think about syllabus writing. And for a lot of years, my syllabi were what um, the education community would call a content-centered syllabus. So if you take a look at this table, it kind of outlines for you what are the hallmarks of a content-centered syllabus. So it was written from my point of view, like I, as the teacher, am telling you what's going to happen. Um, I was focused quite a bit on, what is the content, and what are the kind of like rules or expectations. Um, the the tone, I don't know that it was punitive, but at least in my case, the tone was, I mean, it was pretty dry. Not gonna lie, like sort of logistics. And I don't know how much I was providing in the syllabus in terms of motivation, other than like, these are the things you need to do to succeed in the class. Like, you know, submit your work, and ideally you're doing that on time and coming to class and so on. But over the years, my syllabus slowly shifted towards something that I think is better serving my goal of wanting students to feel welcome and excited and interested in the course. Um, so my over the years, my syllabus transitioned to something closer to a learner-centered syllabus, where you would use a lot more we and us and our in the syllabus instead of I and you. And the focus became more so how can you succeed in this class? How can you learn effectively in this course, right? Why is this course relevant and how can you succeed? The tone became much more warm and encouraging, and inviting, and sort of communicated like a we're in this together kind of message to the students, right? This is not an adversarial relationship. This is a cooperative relationship, and trying to motivate them through curiosity and community as opposed to just grades. I definitely, when I look back at syllabus that I used early in my teaching career, I cringe. I mean, almost anything I look back from my early teaching career, I cringe a little bit, because there's always room for improvement, right? We never arrive as an educator. So if you're interested in writing something closer to a learner-centered syllabus, how might you proceed. Because this is the syllabus template that we're going to give you is aligned with the right side of this slide. So there are some benefits to writing a learner-centered syllabus. So why would we do this? We would do this because research suggests, and I do have some reference slides available in this deck that you'll get if you wanted to go to some of these studies. Research suggests that students' perceptions of both the course and the instructor are improved with a learner-centered syllabus. They're more likely to see the course as relevant and important, and more likely to see you as the instructor as someone they can go to for help, someone who's there to support them. There's a study, there's a study from STEM college level courses. So I want to give that caveat. These are college level courses, STEM courses. There was a study done about what the effect of a learner-centered syllabus was on these different courses. And the primary takeaway was that there was a smaller grade gap between minority and non-minority students. So there's a link to the study if you want to read it. So by creating a more inclusive environment with the syllabus, we might especially be able to help minority students close that gap. So if you're on board with those, what can we do? And the good news is the changes are relatively small. It's relatively easy to shift your syllabus from a content-centered one to a learner-centered syllabus. So one, we can just change the words that we're using. So instead of talking about students broadly, like just students, we can say we and us and our, and we say you instead of students. So to help students see themselves in the syllabus, if you will. So also using an active voice in the syllabus. So for example, you will complete an assessment instead of assessments will be given. So make it personal. And then more positive, inviting language. So I encourage you to, or I would like you to, instead of do not. Do not feels, and especially if it's all caps like that, feels pretty aggressive. And remember, this is their first impression of you and the class. That doesn't mean we don't have high expectations and there aren't boundaries that we expect students to adhere to, but maybe a softer approach at the beginning is good. Keep in mind that not only are your students reading the syllabus, but often their parents see it as well. And using this warmer, more inviting language can also be a benefit to the parent in terms of thinking about this as a cooperative relationship. Students also want to know a little something about you. So it's not a bad idea to include something about you in the syllabus. We often ask students on the first day of school, like, to do these sort of like icebreaker get to know you activities where we ask them to tell us and tell other students a bunch of things about themselves, which is a little bit vulnerable. So maybe we can do that a little bit too, so that again we're kind of all in it together. They're curious about you, they want to know. So you'll see in our syllabus template we have some sample language at the syllabus that says a little bit about the instructor. So that's another way that you can use language to create this inviting vibe for your course. So as another simple change is to like reword the headings in your syllabus. So really common headings in a syllabus are course description, course objectives, grade calculation. We can reword those a little bit to be more inviting to students while still doing what we want them to do. So instead of the course description, why should I be excited about this course? We're still going to talk about what the course is about, but we've reframed it in this way. What will you be able to do by the end of this course, right? That's where our course level learning outcomes can go in the syllabus. And then how will your learning be assessed? So instead of how your grade be calculated, how are we going to determine if you've met the learning outcomes? We can also improve readability, and this is good just for accessibility, both for students and parents who might be reading this document. One suggestion is to make sure that the text in the syllabus is 1 to 2 grade levels below the course's grade. So if you're teaching a 12th grade economics course, we might want to aim for a 10th or 11th grade reading level. And there are lots of tools online, including AI tools that you can use to adjust the reading level of a text. You can paste it in and say, what is the reading level of this text? Uh, Modify it for, a 10th grade reading level, for example. Because it's more important that students understand the document than that we're using, fancy vocabulary. Um, Even just keeping sentences short. So if there are multiple clauses in a sentence, maybe it's better just to create 2 sentences instead of one. Oh, great, Brian. And you feel free to add on in the chat to what you've gathered from the online courses. Using short common words. So here's some examples. So instead of saying utilize, just say use. Instead of saying facilitate, say help. Instead of saying commence, which is a word I very much like, maybe I should just say start. Right? So clarity of communication is more important than, you know, having a fancy syllabus, right? Which for me can sometimes be a challenge, but I'm trying to do better, right? Use the words that my students will understand more than the word I like, perhaps. We can format our document in ways that achieve some of these goals too. So we can make some choices about our fonts, right? This is not just about making a pretty document. This is about making a document that's clear and communicates with our audience well. So some of the same advice for like presentation slides in a class, don't use 5 different fonts. Um, it's suggested that sans serif fonts are more readable. So right now, the font that you see in the body of this slide is a sans serif font, right? It doesn't have little feet on some of the letters. The font that is the title, the word format on this slide is a serif font. So you can see how the M and the R like has little feet at the bottom of it. So for the body, ideally you're using a sans serif font. No more than 2 to 3 text sizes. We want this to be readable, not too busy. Adding a little more space, but so instead of a single spaced text, maybe add a little more space between the lines, so like 1.15. And you'll see all of this in our sample syllabus. And then avoid overusing all caps, bolding, or underline. Sometimes we go a little crazy with that, and then they stop having any effect. Maybe no all caps at all would be good advice. But so be sparing about bolding and underlining so that it has the effect you want it to have. And then the layout, avoiding really big chunks of text because students will often just skip those. So if we break up the text into smaller chunks, it's more reader friendly. Yeah, how many pages is too many? I don't have a firm answer on that. The syllabus template that we've created is 3 pages. I would say for me, I would aim for no more than 4 if I can. I just worry that if it goes much longer than that, I don't know that they're actually reading it. And if it goes much longer that maybe I'm telling them things in the syllabus that they don't actually need to know until later. I realize your school or your district might require certain things in the syllabus that will stretch its length. I do have some advice about that. All right, or even shorter, like John suggests, front and back. Using columns can improve readability. You'll see that in our sample. And then we can make it a little more visually appealing than just text. We can use some call-out boxes, graphics that are relevant, but not too many, right? If it becomes like a comic book, then maybe that's too much, too busy for some readers. So let me show you some examples that I think are doing some of the things that I just mentioned. So these are from Canva. And if you've not used Canva as a classroom educator, you have access to a free account with the premium features, including like these syllabi templates. So the text is broken up. There are some graphics, but not too many. These are pretty inviting and reader friendly. Now, these are for English, which some of you might teach English, but you're here for an economics event. So I'm going to show you an economics example. I just want to highlight some possibilities. The one on the right is in color. I did never had access to a color printer in the classroom, and maybe you don't either. So keep that in mind and thinking about how things are going to print. So other things to think about before I show you the template. Um, Another question to ask yourself, and this is helpful for writing that course description, is what makes your class distinctly valuable? What are you offering to students that they're not going to get in other courses? Like, what's your unique value proposition? That can be a really important thing to communicate in that course description. Like, why should you be excited about this class? Well, here's what you're going to get here that you're not going to get anywhere else in your time at this school. And I know the schools I worked for certainly had language they wanted to appear in everyone's syllabi. So those could be attendance policies. Maybe now it's a policy about AI, any number of things. My suggestion would be to put all that at the end, to communicate that that's less important for this specific class. They're also going to have that in all of their syllabi. So I don't want to take up valuable space on the first 2 pages with information that they're going to have everywhere and is maybe not super important to what's happening in my specific class. So I know that you might have that. You have to kind of toe the line about that. But for me, I would just put it at the end. And then one more thing before I show you the template. For a long time, I talked to my students about the syllabus like I use the analogy that it was like a contract, right? So that the idea was that we both have obligations to each other. But then I read this associate professor who was quoted in an article about writing syllabi saying that framing it as a contract might be setting up an adversarial tone or adversarial relationship in the classroom, which is absolutely not what I wanted to do. She suggests that it implies that I don't trust you, and so I have to have this contract that you sign or that your parents sign, saying that you're going to do it, and that might be creating a tone that I didn't intend. So I've shifted away from using that language, even though I meant it as like I have obligations to you, I have expectations for you about the class too. But that's something that I've changed over time as well. So what are the tools that we can use to make our syllabus? Of course, there's word processing software. You might use Microsoft Word or Google Docs. The template I'm going to give you is in Google Slides, which I mean, this was a revelation. Several years ago, this was a revelation to me. Like, I can create documents in Google Slides. I just changed the size of the slide to the size of a standard sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11 inches. The reason we made our syllabus template in slides is it makes it much easier to include graphics and tables. Google Docs can be can be frustrating with some of those things. So that to me was a revelation. And the sample we'll share with you is in that format. Canva, as I mentioned, and you can find templates for Word and Docs and Google Slides and Canva for writing syllabi so that you don't have to create one from scratch. And if you're not especially artistically talented, like myself, those templates can be really helpful. But also, now increasingly, you might get some assistance in this process from your AI tool of choice. Maybe you have access to Magic School or there are free versions of most AI tools like Claude and ChatGPT and Perplexity. You might be able to use those. And you can tell it, like, I want to create a learner-centered syllabus. Here are some of the things I'm looking for. Here's what I currently have. How would you make it better? Absolutely, take the template. So, Jay, you set me up for that nicely. So we've created a template in Google Slides. So Elise is going to share the link in the chat again. So it's 3 pages. All of this is editable. So these are text boxes in the Google Slide. So you can change the headings, you can change the placement. But what we've tried to do here is adhere to the suggestions around a learner-centered syllabus that I just shared with you and align this syllabus to the 1 semester economics curriculum that we have on our website. So you might be doing something a little bit differently. Your course might be, for example, organized into different units of different lengths of time. You can adjust everything here. But you'll see that we are talking about we and us, and we're asking things like, how will your learning be assessed? What can you do to succeed in this class? I especially like the last page, which we've titled Our Partnership This Semester. And so I started doing this in my syllabus several years ago, where it was, I would sort of tell the students, here's what you can expect from me. These are the things I'm committing to doing to help you this semester. But there are also some things I'm expecting from you. So these mutual expectations. And then we did include a space for any school or district language you might need to include. I know it's optimistic that it's only like 20% of the page. Um, but we wanted to acknowledge that that's a thing that you might be required to do. So I want to pause here and give you a chance to open up that syllabus template if you've not done so already. Take a look. Um, and then you can tell us in the chat, are there elements that you like here that you want to use? You just might want to pull that language over to your syllabus. Or if you were going to use this template, and there are some changes you would make, what might those be? So we're going to pause here and let you tell us in the chat what you like or what you might change. And I'll go back to this slide just in case you are accessing today's event on a device where it's not really handy to have multiple tabs open. Yeah, thanks, Stacy. We know that no syllabus that we make is going to perfectly match what you want or need. So that the ability to edit it, we know is super important. Um, yeah, it took me 17 years to get to this version of the syllabus, or 18 years to get, I've taught for 18 years. Took me that long to get to this version. You don't want to see what the earlier versions look like? So one note, you do see some color here. And again, I never had access to a color printer in the classroom. You probably don't either. We did print this black and white just to check what does it look like. Does it use a ton of toner? It doesn't. So we added some color here, but we also wanted to make sure it was printer friendly for a black and white version. Yeah, thanks, Sue. We have updated it recently. So there are some minor tweaks to it now. Um, So you might see a few things. We didn't include under the supplies a textbook because our curriculum doesn't call for a textbook, but it's easy for you to add that here on the supplies. Well, friends, we are getting close to the end of our time together, and as I suspected, there's not enough time. Thank you. You all have been sharing this bit in the chat for us. There's not enough time for me to say a few words about designing your classroom's physical space. So what does the research say about classroom displays and creating a welcoming environment through the physical space? But I have included slides here for you with links to resources, um, including some basic do's and don'ts based on the research. So those are there for you. if you're interested in the slides. That's why I didn't put these on the objectives for today because I didn't think I would get to it, and it turns out I was right. Um, so we do have some posters for our for principals. If you complete the Unit 1 on demand, you will send you a copy of these posters. If you're using our materials and you really want these posters, send us an email. We can work something out and get these posters to you. So as we wrap up, these were the goals we set out with. So I hope you're leaving here feeling um, excited about course level learning outcomes and maybe some changes to your syllabus as you get ready for the academic year ahead.